Excellent.
There we go.
All right, we all back.
One more person.
One more.
Okay.
Yeah.
More this up. Is it Luciana or Chana?
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting
I took notes.
I hear him getting tea.
Are we rolling? Linda?
You are on air.
Live to the internet. Okay, so well, the nuts and bolts section today is we're gonna talk a little bit about the physical practicalities of practicing. Beginning with, as Lynn mentioned, a spaced practice. Not everybody has room. You might live in a small apartment with no room. You might live in a big house with space. Having some dedicated area, whether it's an entire room or a small space that's just dedicated to that purpose, can be a huge sports practice. You don't have to have your own shrine room, but if you have a place where you don't have the interference of your other activities, it can create this environment similar. It's like the physical manifestation of your refuge vow. When we first started coming to KCC, Michael would often give the instruction that refuge is, when you come into the shrine room, you can use that opportunity to spend that hour taking refuge because it's contained, and it's actually kind of easy not to take refuge in your job and all these other things. If you could just use this nice contained space while you're taking refuge vow. That's what a shrine room or a shrine space or a shrine nook can offer you if it's a dedicated area, and you might even have to like move a chair or something to make it a dedicated space. But it's not so much that it's like a sacred space in some kind of mystical sense. It's really just that it's dedicated, and over time, when you have other barriers arise, sometimes just something as simple as a reserved space for the only thing you do there is practice can really be a big benefit. I think that's enough to say on that. Do you want to talk about the shrine, or do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I'd just say that Isha, you raised it, like to being able to carve out a little space that feels like it really belongs to your practice. In a certain way, it's a manifestation of your intention to practice, and it's there all the time. And anytime you step into that space, you are relating to your own wish to practice, your own intention to bring your practice into your daily life. And you mentioned it too, Lynn. Like, there can be real strength and support in having it be separate from your computer and your other activities and your children. It's really a gift that you can give to yourself and give to your practice to make space for it.
We didn't add this, but just now occurred to me one thing that's kind of a good thing too. Don't take this with you. leave it outside. This is one of those things that's like the whole world, and when you bring it in, when we were sitting here, someone was texting, and I was watching it come up. And if you're sitting there meditating, not that I have any personal experience with it, it can be really, especially if you practice in the morning and you're thinking about day, and maybe that's somebody from work. Or
What if you have that though for like, I mean, it can be, there's this wonderful app that has
yeah,
the little
Inside
bell
time.
and the
Yeah.
You're using
timer
those.
and the thing like that, right?
absolutely. So, yeah.
Airplane.
Again, experiment. If it's a support, by all means.
Yeah, okay.
If it's for me, it's really not. And so
When we do, we've done some personal retreats over the years, and I always use my cell phone as my timer. But as Linda mentioned, I put it into airplane mode. So I'm not receiving email, I'm not receiving texts, I'm not getting any updates on what Donald Trump tweeted. Like, all of that stuff that magnetizes me does not just come popping up and catch my eye. So when you make a space for practice, it doesn't necessarily have to be a shrine. It can, I've talked to lots of people over the year who just managed to find a corner where they could put up a screen and they could have a cushion, and maybe they didn't have anything that they looked at. Or I have a friend who just put a stone on a table and liked to use that as a visual focus for his shamatha, and didn't have any other elaboration there. Like it does not have to look like this. You are not the, but you can also, if you would like, make a shrine in your practice space. And the truth is, the entire time that I've been at KCC, I've never received formal instruction on how to properly construct a shrine. And if anybody really wants to do that, I'm going to refer you to Dora or to Zopa, both of whom I know have great technical knowledge and insight. But I think for me, what's important about the idea of a shrine is you are creating something that you're going to sit in front of that inspires you and that helps you to feel a connection to the idea of refuge. So when we moved into our current house and we set aside space for our meditation room, we did our first full Fandango shrine, and I remember when we were putting it together, I was like, well, we got to have all of these guys. Like we have to have pictures of all of the important teachers up there, even though I had never met most of them and I didn't relate to half of them. And like this whole list of we got to have this, we got to have that, we got to have all of these different pieces. And I bought it all and I put it all together, and I just didn't relate to it. It wasn't meaningful to me, and the truth is, to this day, I have a set of water offering bowls, and they sit in the drawer. And our shrine over time has come to be some statues that we bought when we were in India and that we were able to have blessed at the monastery there, and a couple of pictures of teachers who I've met who I really feel like it is possible to think, yep, that person could be enlightened. Like people who I really felt a sense of inspiration when I was in their presence. And then I light 2 candles and I light some incense when we practice. But when I do those things, I do actually, at some point I did learn about the 8 offerings, which are what is symbolized when you do have a shrine and you have the 7 bowls and 1 candle and you fill the bowls every day. There's actually something you're supposed to be thinking about when you do that, which I learned maybe 3 years ago. And in prepping for this class, I realized we actually have a fantastic handout that details that, and the especially wonderful thing about it is that this was compiled from notes Lama Michael made when he was on his 3-year retreat from the teachings there. So you do not have to build a shrine. You do not have to make the 8 offerings every day. But if that inspires you, if you read this and you think, oh, this is like there's some juice there, then I encourage you to do it and work with it. And maybe at some point Dora and Zopal will walk us all through like the proper way to construct our home shrines.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
When you go into a Tibetan, if anybody's had the opportunity to go into a Tibetan monastery, you realize that what looks like an impressively decorated shrine room looks austere compared to a monastery. Tibetan monasteries just have an insane amount of ornamentation, and it can be really overwhelming to people who don't know what all that means. But everything that you see when you walk into a shrine room like this offers the opportunity for some kind of practice and some kind of support to practice. And that's really, when you construct your shrine or your shrine room, what you want to do is put stuff in there that inspires you to practice. So in a shrine room, you might have a tanka of Chenrezig, who is a deity that we do Chenrezig practice here. So you might have that. You have pictures of people who inspire you. There's the practice that Sally just handed out of the offerings. Doing offering practices is another thing that you can do. When people come into a shrine room, they often will do 3 prostrations. This is a way of doing more practice. You can have a very strong devotional connection to teachers, and in fact, the practice, as you get more deeply into some of the practices, depends on that. And so you see things like Kal Rinpoche, who is Lama Michael's teacher, and who founded the center, in his picture on the throne room, the throne. All of these things are ways to do that thing that Sally talked about earlier, making our life practice. And when you're in a shrine room, it's possible to, every single direction you look, see some object of refuge or inspiration. You don't have to do that in your own house, but it's an opportunity to create whatever is inspiring to you, which is the thing that the shrine room or shrine space, shrine nook, should accomplish. It should be a place that draws you in. It can be beautiful. It can be inspiring. Again, support to practice. Dora, this one was especially hanging over our heads, and when we heard you were coming, like, oh man, Dora's coming. She knows all that stuff. Would you like to add anything at this point?
Well, I would say maybe one reason we don't talk about very often about the way to put together a shrine. Recently the program council's been talking about moving from shrine to altar. Just because we're not enshrining, there's nothing being enshrined, there's no dead, whatever. Well, there's supposed to be, but it's not. And,
The reliquary.
Yeah, right. But, but that's for 37 years I've been using shrine room and shrine, but and partly from Eric's urging, it's like a meditation hall and practice hall or something, and altar. But anyway, there isn't sort of a way to do it exactly. Maybe certain people would teach a way, but another person might teach it slightly different. And also, part of what you see that we have is tradition. We are sort of using pictures where, because we don't have statues, so it's not because if you go into Tibetan temples, they're often going to have very typically 3 huge statues, and then lots of offering bowls. And But, they'll have pictures, but they won't necessarily be on the altar. So there's different ways to do it, but I think what's the fundamental principle in my mind is it's nice if you have two levels and that you have a place where you're, let's say, putting something that is inspiring and represents the sacred and represents Buddha nature, which could be a statue or could be a picture of a teacher or both. That kind of thing on a sort of a little higher level, and then below that you put whatever you want to put to make offerings. And so that it becomes then that the altar is not just a place where things sit, but it's where you do something like Jeff was saying. It's a practice to do offerings. And there's the bowls, but you can also offer nice fruits or flowers or things that you think are beautiful, or have some special rocks. It's like, so anyway, so that principle of the inspirational and the sacred, the Buddha imagery, and the place of making offerings. Yeah, it's nice that you can, and it could be like if you have a statue of the Buddha and you just have a little box that you put it up on. It doesn't have to be like built like this, but just to have a sense of it, it's up a little bit.
Yeah, and we've been doing this a long time. We've been in a number of people's meditation spaces. I've also been saying shrine for 20 years, so, and I've seen people go very simple, and I've seen other people who are like, all of this stuff inspires me. I got 6 levels of like foot-high statues and tankas and silk hangings, and I think that what's important is that if you want to have an altar, it's your altar, and it is about helping you to connect with what inspires you to practice. Whatever that is, nobody is watching. Nobody from here, at least. Maybe your housemates are looking, but there's no altar police. So if it's all beautiful stones piled up that you found when you were out in nature, and that's what helps you to open up into a big view of feeling connected to all sentient beings, go for it. Never turn off the tap of inspiration, I would say.
And don't, yeah.
Well, I was going to add that houseplants are a nice thing to add to the altar, because then you feel obliged to water them, and that again, it's a living thing that you have a relationship with too. It's all, it could be a representation of the Dharma as well. If you have lots of them, it becomes a really beautiful living room. That we have a nook. It's a 600 square foot apartment, so the houseplants take up the whole window side of it now, and it feels like now the whole, the altar is in the middle, and kind of feels like the whole thing has become the altar.
That's so nice. Yeah.
So in your nook, you were going to do some practice, ideally. When you go in there, you want to be able to do practice for as long as you're going to practice comfortably. So posture is another one of these things that there's a lot of instruction about different ways to do it. The 7 points of Vairocana, did I say that right, Dora? Vairocana, which is the full lotus, is always offered as the most appropriate way, and when you see instructions, you get all these really highfalutin instructions about how to sit, on your cushion.
And then if you do a Goenka retreat, you get the whole strong determination.
That's
like
right.
You're not allowed to move at all. Thing layered on top of that.
Yeah.
It's like 4 days in.
Exactly.
Yeah, my knee was slipping out of its socket, and I was like, strong determination. Really bad. I was like, this is really. He's like, no, you just fight through it. All right. We were doing it in India, so it was an Indian guy, and he was like, you can tough it out. And I wasn't speaking the language very well, and he's like, Is it? It turned out it was actually not bad for me to experience that, but it's not ideal. So really the ideal thing is there are a lot of ways to sit in practice, and what you want to do is find a position that your body can be relatively comfortable over the course of the session. That can be sitting on a cushion, it can be sitting on a bench. We have some older folks in our Sangha who need to arrange their bodies in certain ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. The idea is to your body is the support for your mind for the practice. Michael actually just this last Sunday said something about how if you have a still body, it's a support for a still mind. So you want to be able in a position where you can have a still body that's not like in super excruciating pain, because then that becomes the context of your practice. Alan Wallace, a teacher who gave a few retreats here, talked about the four like classic poses that the Buddha taught, which included sitting on the cushion, standing, walking, and laying down. And laying down is actually totally fine too, if your body, if you have bad back or other things. The idea is choose a posture that really supports the practice. So when you set up your shrine room, if you need to lay down, you need to create a space that's possible. If you're doing prostrations, which are these things where you lay out flat on the ground with your arms out, that can actually be a challenge, especially in a 600 square foot apartment. When Sally and I were first practicing, we had a little apartment, and I was doing our bedroom, and I had to arrange the furniture so I can do it. So you do have to be cognizant of all that stuff. But really the idea, in my experience, the main thing is you want to have a straight back, whether you're standing, sitting, laying, or walking. Having a straight back is a really strong support to wakefulness. Once you start doing this stuff, that's when you start to doze off. So whatever posture you're in, whether you're in a chair or whatever you're doing, find a place where you can have your back be straight. One of the classic instructions is imagine that there's a string coming out of the top of your head here, and if you pulled it up so that and it was connected to your spine, through your skull, it would kind of like straighten out like a marionette. Your head kind of drops down into its natural posture. If you can find a place to be like that, whether it's on a chair or someplace else, on a cushion or on a bench, that's really kind of the main thing to look for there.
Yeah. You want to be upright but relaxed. If it takes all of your physical effort to sit in the way that we've chosen to sit, you probably need to tinker a little bit with your posture.
Yeah, I remember that first Sunday, 20 years ago in 1 month. You guys weren't even sitting here then. You were still sitting here, but Bill was sitting right next to me, and I was sitting like that. And I was like shaking at some point, like trying with my legs crossed as my knee was up, and I was like, ah! And Bill saw it, and he handed me a pillow to put under my knee. And it was a really gentle and kind thing. I was like, oh, I don't have to macho this out. This is so nice. I'm proud about that. Those are one of the great moments of that day.
Yeah, Jeff.
I was just going to ask you guys, I know we don't, or maybe we do, and I just haven't caught it, but we don't discuss the other three, the lying, standing, and walking meditations very much here, it seems, and I know I've read, like Thich Nhat Hanh actually talks a lot about practicing and leading walking meditations, I've noticed, and there was a monk I went and heard speak at PSU that came, and he also was very into practicing and leading walking meditation. And so I was just wondering, like, if you guys have anything to say about, like, are any of those, like, to be discouraged compared to all the sitting meditation, or is there something that would be beneficial to experiment with them also, or do you guys have any thoughts thoughts or experience or anything to say about the other three forms also. I always think it sounds really cool, like when I hear about, like, you know, the circumambulations of cool places in Asia, and then Thich Nhat Hanh leading his walking meditations. I always think I should probably be doing more of that also. Like, that seems good, but it seems like we don't really discuss encouraging that stuff so much. So I just wondered if you guys have something
Yeah, it's
to
not,
say about it.
a walking meditation is not really something we can do in this space. When Eric gave his retreat last summer, we did walking meditation throughout the day. It was part of the program. And he gave us instruction on how to do that. And it was a little dicey. We were like going out around the shoes, and the space was a little tight. But when we get into our new space, it's actually large enough that we could do walking meditation.
And can you do them outside? Is that a? It seems like Thich Nhat Hanh's are outside.
You can do it inside, you can do it outside, but I think it would be a great thing to ask at a Sunday Q&A, especially once we get into the new space, and see if maybe we could get some formal instruction on the method for doing that. But yeah, I love walking meditation, so I did some coursework at Maitripa, and they do it quite a bit there, so I received some instruction in the method that they used, and it's not the kind, it's not inconspicuous the way that they do it. You walk very slowly, and then there's a point where you walk very quickly, and so it's not a stealth thing, like you could just be up at Pill Hill kind of walking and meditating. People would notice that you were doing something unusual. But yeah, if you have the space and kind of the privacy to do it, I think it can be a really great technique, especially it was wonderful during retreat where we were doing a lot of sessions of sitting, so to be up and moving but still mindful was really wonderful.
I would say the only thing I'll add here, and I do think this is probably a better question for Bill, Laura, or Michael, or one of our teachers. But from my own practice, what I can say is the posture is not the retreat. So if you lay down, when I lay down, I fall asleep every time. And when I do walking, because walking is something that I do, I've done less walking retreat than Sally, but a fair amount, I think. I walk to like get my mind going, to like think. So when I meditate and I walk, that same thing happens. So the posture is there to support the practice. I think what I would say is always remember that the practice is the thing that you're doing, and the posture is the support for the practice. So if walking is something, whatever that is, and there are people who lay down, and for the first time they're not in pain and they can actually do a whole session, they have great meditation. I mean, that's good. If you fall asleep like I do every time, it's probably not the best posture. So, but yeah, experiment with them. That's one thing that I think we'll keep saying over and over again is feel invited to experiment with these. The Buddha taught these 4 postures, so it comes from as solid a source as you're going to get in terms of kosher, like ultra kosher.
Yeah, and I think the only time we've ever gotten instruction on what was referred to as the corpse pose was from Alan Wallace on one of his retreats. Again,
That's laying down.
Where there was actually space enough for everybody to lay down and for him to walk us through like exactly how to establish that posture. So.
I'd say a little about lying down, because I think I'm a person who got really invested my whole life in really trying super hard and doing everything super well, and really sitting up, and, if you were supposed to sit up and not move, then I was gonna sit up and not move by cracky, and, coming here, the instruction, which is relatively consistent, I think, and also at Lana Michael's direction, I've listened to a lot of Ken McLeod podcasts, and there consistently is instruction to relax. Like if you lose your focus, or just a way of bring your attention back, and then relax and really do that. And I didn't know relaxing from I thought I was relaxing, but I didn't know. And then a year and a half ago, I fell in a grocery store and broke my leg and broke my hand, and I was pretty much couldn't move around for a couple of months, and I had to practice prone. And then I was just getting better from that, and I started having some symptoms. And a year ago, right now, I had to have a hysterectomy. And so, again, for about 6 weeks, I was very not able to be physically around much. And in both of those periods, one after the other, I had to practice prone. And, a year ago exactly now, for a couple of weeks, I had a lot of pain meds, and I would practice. And, of course, I would fall asleep. And I just, like, all the judgments had to... If I put on those judgments that I'm supposed to do this thing, it was hopeless. So it was just like, okay, I'll practice, and if I fall asleep practicing, I will try. The first thing where my mind will be when I wake up is practicing. So it just, that went on for a while, and it was really important that happened to me. In terms of that they happened, both of them. Once was not enough. To just get it, that relaxing the body. Attention is one thing, but being able to relax the body too is just really important. And I had to go to be prone to get that, to let my body to experience a different thing than me. And I still practice prone maybe half the time, because it just really is better for me. I give it a while. Falling asleep is really a challenge, but in terms of being able to let go in your body in certain ways that I think are also really important to practice, it was really helpful.
Thank you.
We're getting a little tight on time, so I'm going to
Go for it.
zip pretty quickly here, because we want to have at least a few minutes to talk about holding the big view. So we've talked about space, altar, getting comfortable. Of course, making time in your schedule is a major piece of establishing a regular habit of practice. And this is really a place where there's no one size fits all. As busy Americans with really different kinds of lives, some of us are working, some of us are retired, some of us live alone, some of us have families. We have a lot of complications in our lives. So when you're thinking about making a commitment around practice, be realistic about what's workable for you. So, maybe it is first thing in the day. I remember having a conversation with Kathleen Benz at one point, early in my practice career, where she said, I live alone, I sleep alone, so when the alarm goes off, I just sit up in bed and I practice. It's the first thing I do. I don't get out of bed. I just do it right then and there. And then I always know it. It doesn't matter what time it is. It's when I woke up. It's just the first thing that I do. Maybe for somebody else, it's I can get 5 minutes. Like, my life is crazy, but I get a break and a lunch break and a break, and I can do 5 minutes in each of those slots throughout my day. Or I know lots of folks, when we first started, we practiced at home after work, after dinner. It was the only time slot we had that was really workable for us. So think about what you can actually do, and actually do on a consistent basis. And if there's nothing that you can do on a consistent basis, if your life is like totally unpredictable schedule, then make it anchor it to something different. Maybe it's, I will take 5 minutes before I start eating breakfast. Tie it to something that you know you're going to do every day, so that it has an anchor point, but let it be as flexible. If you need it to be as flexible and chaotic as your life is, let it be that, because 5 minutes of practice once a day is better than no minutes of practice. It's always better to do a little than to do nothing. So just be realistic and be honest with yourself about what you can actually sustain, and then choose to do that. And then, of course, if you're going to make a practice commitment, you need to know what you're going to do. And Luciana asked on the...
Oh, I'm not getting to do that.
Oh, go ahead. Jump in.
It's my black section.
I was muttering along.
Oh.
It's short. I don't want the outline.
It's fine. That's just thrown off.
Now you have to take it.
Sorry. We're not going to tell you what practices to do. We're, for one thing, not super qualified to do that, and each person is...
Or at all qualified.
Yeah. And each of you has different practice backgrounds. Some of you have been practicing a long time, some not so long. Again, this is a laboratory, and you can choose to practice something interesting for a month to see how it works that you haven't done before. Sometimes folks, one thing that we heard when we were going around the room is, I've been practicing a while, and I noticed that I'm kind of going through the motions, and I'm sitting there and I'm doing a practice. My mind is on other things. Sometimes changing your practice is a way to re-wet it and make it interesting. So just choose some practice that you think you're comfortable with and you can do for these 4 weeks. And we don't really even have to know. You can just kind of keep your own counsel on
You need to know what you committed to. We don't need to know what you committed to. And if you have deeper questions about what practice should I be doing, the thing to do is really to set up an interview with one of the teachers. There are a range of practices that are taught and supported here. There's the shamatha we do on Sundays, there's Chenrezig on Wednesdays, there's the practice of Tonglen and the 7-point mind training, there's the whole Mahamudra program curriculum, there's probably something else in there as well. And sitting and having, if you really feel uncertain about what you want to be doing at home, what you should be doing at home, it's great to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with a teacher who can help you tune that up. But we all at least know how to do shamatha. If you've been to one Sunday session, you've received at least the basic instructions for refuge and shamatha and dedication of merit. So if you've got nothing else in your toolbox, you've got that.
And with the kind of practice you do, just one comment here. One thing that we often do is we take whatever's out there in life, and we try to make it work for our lives. We try to adapt it to our lives. We do this with practice too. Like, we flip it. Instead of doing practice to undermine our refuges and other things, sometimes we try to make our practice help us in life and do these other things. So again, in the spirit of the month-long commitment, think about that as you approach your practice, and think about what practices will help create practice as the context of your life and undermine the commitment that we have to our worldly affairs. So whatever that practice is.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does it tend to be better to do just one type of practice and at a time, for a month or months or years or whatever, and then or mix mix up different types of practices within one session or every other day? Is there any just general instruction on that?
This is it's a really great question, and it's kind of a key question for a class like this. Finding practices that work for you. The cool thing about Tibetan Buddhism is there are so many different practices. The bad thing about Tibetan Buddhism is there's so many practices, and no one is there. The idea is not that we do all these different practices. You're not expected to do all the practices that KCC offers in the course of your daily practice. They're offered so that you can find the ones that are inspiring to you and do help undermine that commitment we have to our worldly life. And it really varies. So for some people that would do the Mahamudra program, that's actually kind of a portfolio of different programs. So if you do that, you do several different practices. Other people do kind of like what you said. They'll rotate different practices throughout the year. Some people only do one practice, and it's critical if you're going to make your daily practice a cornerstone of your practice life. It's critical to find some kind of meditation that inspires you, that actually feeds your desire to, undermine that commitment to worldly affairs. And over the course of your life, those practices will change, and different things will come up. And it's just kind of the over the course of decades, you just end up doing a lot of different practices and working with that and trying different things.
Yeah.
Add anything?
I think, this is one of those places where there may not be a best, and if there is, we're not really qualified to identify what it is. But I'm aware there are so many things in our practice that are really a balance, where we're trying to find again that space between making the practice our own and making up the practice. It's like we want to find practice that really feels juicy and alive, and that we feel engaged with, which may mean changing things up, but we also don't want to just cultivate the habit of hopping from one thing to the next. Like, oh, the next thing will surely be better than what I'm doing now. We can just replicate the pattern we have in life of constantly chasing after the next thing that's supposed to satisfy us. We can take that and apply it to our practice life. It's like, and every one of us, I think, has to wrestle with that and recognize, okay, I've gone as far as I can go down the road of this thing. It is as dry and dead as it could possibly be. I've drained all of the life out of trying to do this practice. I really need to move to something else and shake it up and kind of get the juices flowing again. We can have... I lost my train of thought there. We can have that experience. We can also have the experience of, no matter what we do, you sit down and you think, I should be doing something different. Something different would feel more exciting than this. Every one of us has to wrestle with that. Is this really the time for me to move to something to reanimate my practice, or is this just the constant cycle of craving and aversion that I live with in the rest of my life, manifesting itself?
We'll keep talking this over the course of the weeks too, and kind of poke at it a little bit. All right, we have 1 minute left. Let's talk about the big few. So that our idea was that we would talk a little bit about one of the things that helps keep our practice engaged and alive, which is in our lives and in our daily practice, and even in the space of a session of practice, our minds have a tendency to collapse in. The more we focus on our own needs and our own world, the world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And one of the great antidotes that Buddhism offers is these kind of mind-bogglingly large aspirations and ideas. And they can help pop us out of that further collapsing mind. And if we don't do those in our daily practice, a lot of times we do find that everything feels very tight and very small, and we're judging it based on the quality that we had on the cushion. And if you think of it in a bigger context, if you think of it in the context of doing the practice for all beings, then all of a sudden you think, was that session good? All beings, it can act as this kind of, it pops you out of the that really little kind of constrained space that our minds seem kind of naturally to go to, at least mine does. And the four immeasurables are a wonderful way to both remind ourselves of that bigger view and also apply our practice not only on the cushion but off the cushion to that bigger view, so that we're not using our practice, we're not doing that weird thing where we're driving our practice into self-help and trying to make ourselves feel better, but we're reminding ourselves throughout the day that practice is actually a much bigger thing, and our aspirations are actually much bigger. So I'm not sure what we should do now. We're at 9:01. I think maybe we'll have to...
I'm going to give you a high velocity loving kindness. And we'll be working with the immeasurables in every class, and so we'll have more time. We got started late, and we spent a lot of time on introductions, so we're a little cramped this class, but we'll have more time to go into kind of the classic teachings about how to work with the immeasurables. So you'll just get a little taste here. So the first of the four immeasurables is loving kindness. And it is, at its root, simply the wish that all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. And when we work with any of the immeasurables, we always start that practice by trying to cultivate that in relationship to ourselves. So in preparing for this class, I was thinking about how to go about cultivating a sense of loving kindness for myself, and I kept wanting to go to the place of, these are the things that I know that make me happy, and I found myself kind of reciting this litany of like, oh, if I had this and I had that, and the wish for happiness I hold for myself is getting everything arranged in this very particular way. And I realized that was actually making me more anxious than not doing the practice. So I started to focus, actually just leave aside kind of all of the causes and conditions and think, what does it feel like to be happy? To actually feel completely relaxed and well and whole and at ease and just at peace in the world. Like, everybody's had at least one moment of that. Like, even like sitting in a chair in the sun by a lake, someplace peaceful in the middle of the summer, like, you know what it feels like. And bring that feeling into your awareness and let that sort of settle and be present. And then you can just think, may I have this? May I be happy? May I have the causes of happiness? And then if you have the energy, you can extend that out and just like having a felt experience of how wonderful that is. Just hold the wish. May other people have this. May they be happy. And you don't have to worry about what they're going to get or how you're going to do it. Just think, I wish everybody could have this. And may my practice flourish in a way that I become more and more capable of offering this to the people I encounter in the world. So just work with that a little bit if you can this week, and especially for yourself.
I'm going to add one thing,
Okay.
which I think Sally talked about, working with it on the cushion in your practice. All of these practices have a component in which, if we have the mindfulness, which is always the challenge, and it's what our daily practice, one of the things it does is help us create mindfulness throughout the day. If we have the mindfulness, we can practice loving kindness
As a caring practice.
as a caring practice, and we have all these beings out there to whom we can extend our loving kindness. And Alan Wallace has a book on the four measurables, and he wrote something, I don't know, I'm not sure where he got it, that book.
Available in the bookstore.
I'm not sure what teaching this comes from, but it's one of the most profound teachings I've read, and it has really been beneficial to me. He says the very root of the yearning for happiness, this yearning to be free of suffering, is the fundamental expression of Buddha nature. So everybody who wishes to be happy, if you follow that wish down to the root, you find Buddha nature. One of the things that is difficult when we want to extend loving kindness, when we want to wish other people to have happiness, is there's a moment where we can't nurture a sense of connection to that person, or we may have a conflicted connection to that person. And you may think, I don't actually want you to have happiness. I kind of like you to suffer a little bit. That's because we're not thinking that the expression of their behavior is Buddha nature. But if we think that person, whoever it is, and we live in conflicted times right now, so if you don't have somebody personally, perhaps you can think of somebody on the national, international stage. Somebody. You can think that person wishes to be happy, and my wish that they be happy is a wish that Buddha nature blossom. And who would be exempt from that? There's not a single person we can't nurture that expression for. So when you're walking around, if you can remember that, it's a nice way to try to undermine your small view sense of like, do they deserve my loving kindness? And all these kinds of games we get into.
This class is getting hard now.
Yeah, Alan Wallace talks about how our fundamental nature is loving kindness. It is the immeasurables. Loving kindness is not something we need to go out and cultivate. It's just something we have to uncover. Like, we're full of it. And he suggests at one point, instead of asking, how do I go out and get loving kindness, maybe I should be asking myself, what are the obstacles that are keeping me from manifesting the loving kindness that is actually my true nature? Which that was an interesting flip for me, and something I've been contemplating. And if practicing loving kindness for beings with whom we have a conflicted relationship is too hard, don't feel like you have to go there. You can use loving kindness as a caring practice, simply offering it to yourself, simply coming into the habit of genuinely believing that you deserve to be happy, that we all deserve to be happy, and that includes you. I think for a lot of us, especially in America, it's much easier to go to the place of I'm bad, but I want all of you to be happy, or I'm not living up to standard, but it would be great if all of you were happy. Like you especially as Americans, we have to start with ourselves with these practices, so that we actually have a genuine experience of loving kindness to offer to others. Okay, we did not do that very quickly. We just went 10 minutes over, so.
Yes.
Uh,
We'll endeavor to stop at 9 in the future. This was a little bit of a packed class. I think the next time, the next 4 will be more usual.
we'll ratchet back a little bit.
Yeah. For this week, your task, should you choose to accept it, is to come up with a practice schedule that you can follow for a month. And that means finding a time, the commitment length, whatever that looks like. And think generously to yourself. Think like, what would actually work here? Let's put aside any kind of expectations that other people might have or that I might have or think is right. And just think, what can I do for this 4-week block?
And if you've been practicing for a long time and your practice is feeling a little dead and dry, then try something you haven't tried before.
Yeah, this is a good opportunity to just experiment with it. If it doesn't work, yeah, it's a month. I did the math. I've had something like 250 months of practice. A bad one is not so bad. That's it. Shall we dedicate the merit? If you don't know this prayer, that's okay. Just this prayer, all this is a wish, thinking of the big view, that the experience that we had here today, these 2 hours, the benefit of this extends to all beings.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you, everybody. Good luck.